Right. Just nice and easy with a view to getting a bit of movement through your body. I probably mentioned it in front of you at some point before, but just the Chinese term, the term found in Chinese medicine, translated as stagnation, I think is a useful one to think about. The current heat wave. Heat builds up inside as it can clog up if we're not careful. So temptation is always not to move at all, I think, when it gets ridiculously hot as it is at the moment. But it is good to have a little bit of movement. The mornings are still quite fresh, or at least it was this morning for me. And remember that the body needs a bit of movement to function, including its own cooling systems. I'm not suggesting working up a sweat or anything like that, but just a feeling that joints like your shoulders, your hips are beginning to soften up a little bit. In between the joints, we have the synovial fluid, which kind of congeals without movement, and the heat wouldn't help that either. So as we start to move, the joints soften up, the synovial fluid becomes more liquid. A bit like putting a cold soup on the stove when the soup's gone a bit solid, and the movement produced by the heat just softens it up a little bit. Just notice your breathing. Cooler quality to the in-breath. The out breath just releasing that slightly more stagnant, warmer quality. Another useful little kind of way of moving is to just make these smaller movements. And if I show you with one hand, I'll exaggerate a little bit. See, my weight is moving a little bit. I'm sort of turning a little bit, but the intent is to get your hand, your fingers to travel around in a circle, and you can do it with one side and with both sides. Just feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. It's quite tricky, but once you've got the idea, you'll realize it's quite nice. It's quite nice on the back if you can get the stance, weight forwards, hips dropping back. Just feel your spine responding a little bit. Go at different speeds, but not too fast. Just be aware of areas in your body that feel a little bit stuck. Have this idea of the movement itself beginning to just ease those areas out. So there's no set way of doing this. It's really about intent to get your hands, your fingers to travel around in a circle. I generally notice that my right arm is less responsive than my left arm with this one, which is a bit strange, but there you go. And then get the legs moving, one foot forwards, moving the weight gently, letting your body turn. Nice steady rhythm building through your body. And on the other side. Okay, now feet parallel. Hip width apart, giving you support for your hips and your shoulders. Wide enough to get a feeling of either your pelvis or your torso sort of dropping down between your legs, so whichever image works for you. Begin to rock your weight forwards and backwards, just keeping your feet firmly on the floor. Imagine they're sort of stuck in mud a little bit, and that you're just pivoting from your ankles. Notice when you get to that sort of slightly shaky point, or rather try and notice before you get to it, so that you are able to just slow down a little bit. Imagine doing this in water, so there's just a little bit of resistance, hands out to your side, and that resistance of the water, you lay in your hands just a little bit. So as you go forwards, your hips go forwards, your shoulders, a slight feeling of pulling on your arms and your fingers before they begin to come through. And then dropping your hips back, your shoulders following, your arms following the shoulders. Try and leave your elbows, your wrists, the joints of your fingers nice and soft. Notice where there might be tension being held in your body. Just see if you can sort of move in such a way, or maybe adjust your posture to release that tension, that blockage. Start to feel that your spine, your ribs, maybe even the bones of your legs actually have some kind of space to move in. They're supported by soft tissue of the body, but not held tight by it. If it suits you to regulate the movement with your breathing, then you can do that either way around is fine. But don't hold your breath or force the breath to coordinate. And just beginning to feel that perhaps waking up, that every now and then take that deliberate fresher in breath. Just feel that the blood and the energy is starting to circulate. Maybe just give you a slightly more alert feeling. This time, when you come forwards, settle just behind the ball of each foot, or wherever you feel is most comfortable, using the feeling of your hips dropping back here to just counteract that slight feeling of being forwards. Soften your lower back, so you're just allowing the tail of the spine to release, your pelvis to tuck under. Try not to hold your belly in. Try not to be tight across your belly. Bring your hands around and pushing up and sinking down. body expanding and contracting. We want to feel that the effort that we make to move is spread through the whole of our body. Clearly, our legs will take a major role, as will our back and our spine. But even through those parts of the body, there's a spreading of the load, sinking down, compresses the legs. All the muscles of your legs will be involved in that in one way or another. Some contracting, others will be expanding. And when we come to the push-up, we want to feel that all those parts of the legs that have expanded begin to contract together, so they're not working against each other, and that we're not holding the areas that have contracted tight, so we're not blocking the movement. Similarly, as you feel the movement lengthening and contracting up and down your back, gradually spreading into the front of your body. Again, try not to hold your belly tight or stiffness in your chest or your solar plexus. So that the flow of the blood, the flow of the energy starts to just permeate all areas of your body. And a sense, almost if you could imagine that your body was like a balloon filled with water or even with air. If you squeezed on the balloon and then released it, that release would come from within, if you see what I mean. So it's almost like as we sink down, a sense of pressure, not just compression, builds in our legs and maybe even in the belly, lower back, which then just expands in the way that the balloon would expand. It's just all ideas, seed a memory of the type of movement that we want to make in Tai Chi. When one part of your body is in motion, your whole body is in motion. And that way, the effort is not evenly distributed, as I said, but we find that all parts of the body have a role to play according to their sort of means, as it were. And then change into the wild goose. In addition, we have this idea of moving like water, moving with the path of least resistance, something which certainly everybody present in the class is familiar with. Let's recall that it is possible to move without a sort of grunt or a strain. Remind your body of that. And then parting the clouds, feeling that gentle expansion, like water filling up your body, right up through your back and your shoulders, and then draining away again. So there's a constant cycle of renewal and rejuvenation. This happens quite naturally in our breathing, of course. But we begin to feel it beyond the breath of these movements. One more time. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Do one more on each side. And then pushing in 4 directions. When you do this, remember the principle that we always leave space for a little bit more movement at the end of the expanding stage. We're not straining, we're not locking the body up, we're not trying to stretch. And the other thing to remember is where your hands are in relation to your shoulders. They're there, slightly in front, not pulled behind, which creates a tension. So when it comes to the turning, make sure that you're turning from the center of your body, your hips, and that your shoulders are shadowing that movement. And that just means that there's a very gentle change in the direction that your hands are pushing out in, because your body has turned. One more round. Good, and then changing. And again, very gently, adding the turn. Okay, switch sides. It's an expansion in that side of your body, pushing your arm away, elbow gently curved, fingers pulled back a little bit. Your arm just swings up very smoothly. Try and imagine the shoulder just dropping down slightly. So we want this, not this. And add in the turn. Same thing here. You don't want to stiffen up in your shoulders, sinking down, pushing up. So feeling the impetus for your arms pushing up and down, coming from your legs through the rest of your body. Take the emphasis away from your shoulders. Then your hips going back very carefully. Don't feel you have to go down a long way. Rowing the boat in the middle of the lake. And then just hands in front of your belly, turning. And again, your hips go back, pushing your hands away, pushing the table. One more in each direction. And then go back to this exercise that we did earlier, swaying forwards and backwards. I call it swaying in the river, because you can imagine moving against the current, either in one direction or in both directions. It's a good way of building that slightly stronger, slightly more connected quality of movement within your body. When we use an image like that, or which parts of your body move and when, if at all, do you feel a sort of drawing in your sternum and chest bone? When do you feel movement in your shoulder blades? about your knees, your hips. Okay, and then just come to a halt and stand for a moment. Shake it. Remember to drink, even though you're probably inside, and hopefully it's not too hot where you are. You're still exercising. You'll still be wanting to take on fluids. So now, maybe have your feet slightly wider than hip width apart. I usually find it works better for sideways movements that we're going to be doing, and just transferring your weight from side to side. And usually we're going to build into the exercise bear play. And usually in this, there is a rise and a fall as we do an official rise and fall. A lot of the exercises we do, ideally, that doesn't happen, some people say. But just drop down into your left foot, let your body turn. And then we feel that expansion coming up through the side of the body. We come over and down and we drop down into the other side. I'm exaggerating this so you can see what I'm doing. Come on a little bit closer. And because I'm exaggerating, my hips are going out of line, my knees being pulled around. Don't do that. But I just want you to see this movement. What this does is effectively, if I put my hand on my hip here, you'll see that I'm moving in this way. My hand is actually going around in a circle. Or in a circular fashion. So if I just move my hand to here, then it will actually make more or less the movement that I want to. Then I think about what's happening between my hip and my shoulder. And I feel as I push up here on the opposite side, the expansion comes up through the side of my body and down. And that moves my shoulder, and my shoulder moves my arm just a little bit more. So from the side, and just working on one side at the moment, so that the movement in your arm and your hand mirrors that movement in your hip on that side of the body. So this hip with the hub of a wheel, then your hand would be on the rim of the wheel, just moving that bit further. So try that with your other side. Just focusing on one side. First, we'll start off with your hand on your hip. Just to give you that feeling of movement. And then you'll get more movement just by extending your hand out. So hold your hand in position, but it's a little bit away from the body. And then we feel the push up coming from the opposite side, expanding upwards, not lifting your shoulder, but rolling your shoulder. So your shoulder blade there, just sliding across your back. So try not to stiffen in your back. And then alternating from side to side. So bear play is a fascinating movement because it can tell us a lot about how movement is transmitted from our legs through our center into our upper body. Your arm just extends a little bit, but doesn't completely straighten. Try not to go too far out, because when that happens, you'll tighten up in your back. This is why, and I say sometimes you might want to do this a slightly wider stance. Keep that support in your legs as you move. And if your spine stiffens up, then it will really start to restrict this movement. Always feels like my spine is almost sort of wavy when I do bear play. But again, it's not this, it's not the shoulder coming up. It's a rotation in your shoulder joint, which means that the top bone of your arm, the humerus, there's this big ball on the end of it, and it moves in the socket of the joint. It means that the socket itself is like a door frame, it doesn't need to move. So when I talk about rolling the shoulders, I'm talking about a slightly more extravagant movement within the shoulder joint. You get a little bit of movement outside, of course. So the bear walking is quite a powerful, but also very fluid image. And then just taking that slightly more powerful feel, that sense of the internal strength that begins to build. Go into your right. Turn out, don't move the weight, so turn out to your right a little bit. Turn your hand palm up. Push through the right leg, pushing your hand up to shoulder height. The right heel will come off the ground a little bit. So the feet will start to move out just a little bit. Same thing on the other side, hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. So although it's a different movement and we're not going up and down in the same degree as we would with bear play, hopefully, we're not losing that sense of fluidity in spine and back. The movement again clearly starting in our legs, our feet, that extension of the leg, that push coming up through our body. And yet it's supplemented by so many other movements as it passes through and up through your body. So finally, there's a great deal of movement there, moving your arm for you. It's like your arm fills up. I talked about there, the body being like a balloon inflating. Or some balloons have these special shapes, you know, like it's shaped like a rabbit. The rabbit ears stick out because they too fill up with air when it's inflated. And in the same way, your arm inflates almost. Not to say that your arm isn't doing anything. There's a shape there. There's a timing. And it has its own contribution to make to the dynamic quality of the movement. It's not just passive. And then we're going to change to cow gazes at the moon. So for this one, your hands come down and angle out slightly. This is the basic movement. I'll keep my hand in frame. Notice again the feet. This hip coming around allows for a greater turn. And a certain amount of momentum will build up, slowly swinging your arms up higher. And the arms are slightly above shoulder height at the end of the movement. You're looking between your hands, you're gazing at the moon. So you're looking into the mid-distance. And maybe even as I sink down, if I sink down, I can turn a little bit further. But be careful of your back. You're not twisting your back. You don't want to twist your knees. Remember that idea of allowing space within your body and moving within that space, not forcing yourself against it. One more to each side. Good. And again, just shake out. Changing the stance to the bow stance, forward stance, sometimes known as the archer stance, actually. Supposedly, this is how you draw a bow. In fact, my experience of archery, which isn't very much, but is that you're more like that rather than wider. But it may be that in Chinese archery it's done slightly differently. I don't know. But they very much take a line through there certainly in the archery that I do. But nevertheless, that's the name that's given to it. Now, as much as possible, facing forwards. A slight angle like that shouldn't be seen as a major problem, but we want to just gradually try and correct it, but not at the expense of, say, a knee. See how my back knee's collapsed in there. So to make this correction, if you're at an angle like this and you don't feel you've got any control over it, you need to just turn the hips a little bit, so you straighten your upper body up, but at the same time make this movement outwards with your knee and possibly both knees. It tends to be the back knee that is the most susceptible to this. You might want to play around with the angle of this back foot as well, because that can make a difference. And there's anything between, some people have their foot virtually straight here, others have their foot close to 90 degrees. So there's quite a wide range of what's suitable. Sometimes that's dependent on the style of Tai Chi, but like a lot of things like this, I think it's a reflection of just the fact that we're all built slightly different. The significant thing here is that everything is committed to this direction. I'm going forwards. My whole body, my whole intent is directed forwards. You know, if I was, say, doing something like pushing away, you imagine that you know, you happen to push somebody's car, or you know, to get it started. This is what we would do. We wouldn't push like this and move our body like that. We would be splitting the intent, and we would be splitting the energy in those circumstances. Settling into each day. Give yourself that moment just to settle in. It's a kind of releasing, dissolving, melting feeling. Mostly in your hip and your lower back, maybe in your knee as well. And then raising your toes and your heel. and stepping in. Then on the other side, you may find that that setting up of the angle of your upper body is easier on one side than another. There's all sorts of little things that might contribute to being pushed slightly offline. Don't force it. As I've said before, you know, a slight angle there. Obviously, we want to do something about it for the reasons I was just saying, but not at the expense of your knees, and nor is it a case of just wrenching your shoulders around. It would be the whole of your upper body that would move. Again, a really good guide here is, do you still feel that there's a sense of space to allow for movement within your body? And then raising your toes and your heel. So the quality of the movement isn't the first thing that we should be looking at in Tai Chi. It comes as a consequence of other elements. It's not something that we can contrive. This isn't like a dance routine where we might have a piece of music providing, you know, a flow, an image, a continuity, or anything like that. This comes from within. So I suppose you could argue that, you know, kind of like we start within and make the connection outwards. Maybe if you're dancing to music, it might be the other way around. That you make the connection inwards. Obviously, the two aren't totally separate. But where the quality of the movement can be useful is as an indication that something isn't quite right in your posture, and then stepping in. It's like if you drive a car or ride a bike, the first concern isn't, you know, kind of how does it sound or how does it feel, but if it does feel a bit awkward and a bit rough, then it might be an indication that there's something amiss there. And then stepping through. And change direction. Good. We'll do the exercise pigeon spreads its wings. And I want you to focus on this movement. And again, I'm exaggerating. I do it from the side. But from here, you see there's a sort of very concave feeling to the chest, the sternum drawing in, and then pushing out. This is very exaggerated. This is where the pigeon idea comes from there. So that we just work this area. It can be very, very helpful for your breathing, of course. So have 1 foot forward. Start with your weight back and your hands on your belly. Pushing forwards, your weight goes forwards. That pushes your hands forwards. And notice how they go out. And this is where we get that opening in the front of the body. And as we go back, we feel the opening in our back. There's a nice expansive movement. Maybe if it suits you with an in-breath here as you go forwards, maybe not every time, but done correctly, this shouldn't cause any straining. So should give your lungs plenty of space to expand into. Neither should you be feeling that when you move in one direction, the opposite side of your body is somehow being tight. When I do this, my back still feels open. It's just there's a slight drawing in there, but it's not, I haven't sort of gone forwards and squeezed my shoulder blades together or anything like that. Primarily, we're not concerned with how the movement looks, nor are we directly concerned with how far the arms are going. There's more a sense of, oh, that's where they get to when we do it properly. So this can be a good exercise to, if you're feeling a bit congested in the chest, particularly with the heat again, it can be a good exercise to do. One more time. Good. And then with the other foot forwards, pigeon spreads its wings. One of the reasons I like to do this exercise with the arms pushing out as the weight goes forwards. Some people do it the other way around, but it feels like a more direct connection to the movement of my arms. And so means that I'm less inclined to strain to bring the arms up. You can do it the other way around, but I think for me, this way works better. One more time. Change over and go into fisherman castanet. The breathing would actually ideally be the opposite way around here. And that's quite an interesting contrast, because what's happening here is if we're following the breathing, you breathe in, your body fills up, and it's almost like you're blowing your hands away. You're breathing out through your arms and your hands. Again, I mentioned that idea of kind of the in-breath drawing a fresher energy in, the out-breath releasing the stagnant energy, that whole pattern, not just with the breathing, but with all the movements, is really sort of emphasized here, I think. It's almost like you can imagine the stagnant energy leaving your body through your fingers. And then pushing away. And then sit back, leave the right hand, front hand or the hand above your front leg, out in position, turn, let your rear hand swing up and into your shoulder, turn the front hand palm up, and now just go forwards and turn, do the push-pull as you turn, changing the position of your hands, swapping them over, repulsing the monkey. Predominantly facing forwards, maybe just an awareness of what's out of the corner of your eye as you turn. But that's just a glance, you sort of glance, and then you're looking forwards again. So again, back to this idea of the intent. And I talked about that in terms of posture, facing forwards and so on and so forth. But also your awareness, your intention is obviously very much connected to your mind. So here's a definite purpose. You're pushing forwards, pulling back. On the side here, you'll see that when my front hand is in front here, because my shoulders tending to go forward, that's still very much a kind of intent to go forward. It doesn't stop until my hip pulls back. I'm exaggerating now. Now my other shoulder's been pushed forwards, so this is reinforcing the barrier, and then through to here. I am exaggerating it, probably my posture is going out, but I want you to see the action in the shoulders as a reflection of what's happening in my head. Okay, and then shake out. Left foot forwards, fisherman cast net. And then pushing away. Small. And change into repulsing the monkey. So the front hand stays out there until your other hand is on the move, effectively. Only really begins to withdraw when you feel that your hip on that side of the body is pulling back. And then it's almost as though your hip is pulling on your elbow. One more time. Good. Shake out. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Move your head and neck. to one shoulder, your arm. Side. Your back. And your hips. Nice and light on your belly. The upper part of your chest. Shake out. Right. Giving yourself a few moments to settle in once again to this posture and feel that it is a posture that actually allows for a much less strained feeling of just being upright. That again, more like a tent than anything else in the sense that a tent is held up by a variety of anchor points, and obviously some you can do without more easily than others. Lose a couple of pegs from a tent and it generally doesn't collapse, but if the frame breaks, then obviously you've got a more significant problem. But even so, ideally there is this kind of distribution, and that's really what we're looking for, to be able to maintain this without the habitual straining and the consequential build-up of stiffness and heat and so on and so forth. And then just sinking down and embrace tiger, return to mountain. Easy and gently. Settling down, feeling that sort of draining away through your back and your hips into your legs and into the ground beneath you. One more time. And stand. Shake out. Lovely. Always goes so quickly, doesn't it? Thank you very much, everybody.